to Books That Are Right for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a founder, motivational speaker, and of course, entrepreneur as well as an author. No other than Mr. Luke
How
Mickelson.
are you? Thanks for having me on.
Welcome on Book 101, Mr. Luke. And I'm fabulous. And thank you so much for being part on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
You bet. Yeah, I'm Luke Mickelson. I'm from a small town in Idaho called Kimberly. And years ago, in 2012, so almost 14 years ago, I stumbled across a problem in my hometown where kids were sleeping on the floor. And so as a Christmas project, built a bed for a family. And when I delivered it and shared it with other people what I was doing, that's when I discovered, Daniel, that child bedlessness is not may not be a real word, but it's a real problem and it exists everywhere. And so I started a charity called Sleep in Heavenly Peace in 2012, and now we have grown to over 430 chapters nationwide. We're in 4 countries, and we've built 300 over 350,000 beds for kids just since 2018. So it's an honor to be on your show to share some of my story, and some of the things that I've learned about being a nonprofit, coming into the nonprofit world with no background or business starting a nonprofit, but sharing some of the do's and don'ts that I learned along the way.
And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And Mr. Luke, thank you for inspiring our children for our future generations. So let's talk about the teaching nonprofits and do's and don'ts.
You bet.
So tell us, one fundamental tension in the sector is between heart and hustle, the mission driven passion and the need of operational discipline. What is the first mindset shift you teach to help leaders to hold both without sacrificing one for the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good juggling act. When I started my charity, I was still had a full time job somewhere else, right? And at first, I thought that was a handicap, and it quite frankly was. I didn't get to devote as much time to helping these kids as I wanted to, but because of that, I think it helped me shape and help me learn one of the greatest lessons that nonprofits have to learn, not need to learn, they have to learn and follow, or they become stagnant, or they might close down. And that is what's called mission creep. So, when I was starting this nonprofit, working full time, I didn't have time to, to do much to it. I had to make this process of finding these kids, building these beds, and then delivering them as easy and as simple and as transparent as possible because I didn't have time to do anything else. And I remember I had a story where, I didn't know, never ran a nonprofit before in my life, so I wanted to learn what a nonprofit, how it's ran, and learn something from someone that's been doing it for a long time. So I went to the local nonprofit called East End Providers and spoke with the executive director. And Daniel, when I walked into this house, it was so full of clutter of all sorts of things, coats and shirts and shoes and bikes, and I mean everything. They were like almost like a thrift store. And I remember walking out of that meeting with her. I learned a lot without her even really saying much. I learned that, what, I'm not going to be able to manage all that kind of stuff. My heart might want to help these kids with anything that they need, desks or school book or backpacks or food or whatever. I knew that these kids probably needed that, but I didn't have the time or the energy to be able to focus on everything. So I've decided right then and there, what? I'm just going to build beds. I'm going to do it the best I can, and that's all I'm going to focus in on. So that razor, you know, pinpoint focus on one thing, on one mission, is what I learned now in the nonprofit world as avoiding mission creep. And so any of those nonprofits that I've counseled with and worked with, that's the number one thing I talk about first is making sure you find your mission and you don't deviate it no matter how much you want or your volunteers or your core team members or even employees that you hire, how much they want to change. You just can't. You got to stay focused on one thing.
The nonprofit label, Mr. Luke. How does a label nonprofit itself sometimes create a limiting belief or behaviors in leaders and boards? What language or identity do you encourage them to adopt instead?
Oh, I think they need to understand that when you start a nonprofit or run a nonprofit, this is a business, just like a for-profit company is a business, and you have to look at it that way. There's no difference other than the nonprofit doesn't pay taxes, right? And I started and sold many businesses. So I'm an entrepreneur. I love doing that. So with that background, I didn't know any better, and luckily that was another lucky dumb luck lesson I learned was I took on this nonprofit world, if you will, with a soul running it the way I thought, which is you run it like a business. You have overhead, you have product, you have inventories, you have things that you need to keep track of, control. Just a passionate heart doesn't carry the success of that a nonprofit needs. You have to sit down and establish a plan and a budget, and work with strategies that are scalable, and even right down to the naming and the logo of the charity that you use. These things all need to be considered and looked at. Too many times, Daniel, I talk to people that actually almost get offended when I say you have to run a nonprofit like a for-profit. They don't want it. They don't want it to be, a company that they work for, like the company they work for. They want something different, and I get that. I really do. However, you still have to understand that this organization depends on money coming in and money going out. And if you don't have a way of managing that, if you don't have a way of controlling that and seeing it and knowing how to adjust to growth and adjust to other needs that might pop up, you're not going to be in business very long.
Definitely. So, Mr. Luke, the overwhelm factors. Nonprofit teams are often small, under resourced, and emotionally invested.
Mhm.
When teaching overwhelmed leaders, where do you tell them to point their limited focus first for the greatest impact?
It's a great question. I'm a strong believer in taking a round peg and put it in a round hole and
Yeah.
then just let them work. Sleeping Emily Peace got to be the biggest nonprofit bed building charity in the world, not because of some guy from Idaho. I promise you that. No, it was a group of people. It was a group of people that luckily I knew I didn't have time to manage them or micromanage them. I found what I think I'm good at is I found people that had skills in the areas that SHP or Sleep in Heavenly Peace needed, right? So someone
Mhm.
that had a financial background, we put them on finances. Someone that was process oriented, we put them as a manager, and then the trick here is just allow them to do it. Because what happens, Daniel, when you allow people to actually do their job and make decisions, even if it's decisions that you wouldn't make or might even be a wrong decision, that's okay. Because what is happening is you're giving ownership of your organization, of that position. You're giving it to that person, right? Now they feel invested. They feel vested. They feel like they're a part of it. They feel like now it's their responsibility to show up. And in the nonprofit world, unfortunately, we can't pay people like for-profit companies can. We don't have that kind of margin in our products. We don't have that kind of commitment, if you will, when it comes to financial security for families. We don't. Sometimes the only paycheck or satisfaction that these employees can get is the result from the mission. And so if you don't allow them to feel a part of the growth, especially a startup company, if you don't allow these employees and leaders to feel like they're a part of growing something, then you're going to lose them because or they just won't work as hard. They'll start looking at it as a job, and then you've lost them. And so it's really important, I think, to allow people to do their job, let them make mistakes, right? Work with them, but let them make mistakes, and you'll find them to be, those types of employees that work after 5 o'clock and get up early in the morning and won't require, you know, total hands-on management because they want to do what's right.
Mr. Luke, what's the most damaging yet persistent piece of a common wisdom in the nonprofit world that you actively work to debunk?
Great question. I think consistency is difficult. It kind of goes back to the mission creep I spoke of, and that takes all sorts of shapes and forms as you grow an organization, whether it's for profit or nonprofit. You have to stay on course, and in the nonprofit world, where that becomes really difficult is as you grow, you need more people to be a part of your organization. Well, the more people you bring in, the more hearts and opinions and desires of others come in as well. And if you think about it, these people are a part of a nonprofit because they have huge hearts, they're very philanthropic, they want to help. So these types of people, in, like, let's say our case, where they're going to deliver a bed to a family who can't afford a bed for their child, they probably can't afford a lot of things. So these volunteers walk into these houses, and there's a child sleeping on their clothes, right? They're excited to
Yes.
bring her a bed, but they also notice, well, she doesn't have a desk, she doesn't have a chair, and she doesn't have a coat, or all of these other things that they're recognizing that these kids or these families need. And of course, their mind and their heart kicks into full gear, and they want to start providing all of these things for these families. And that's the hardest part for leaders, to make sure their volunteers stay the course, stay the mission. Because the minute you start letting a little bit of that come in, that's when you open the door for diluting your mission. We build and deliver beds for kids. That's it. We don't do teddy bears. We don't provide children's books or pajamas or anything like that. We provide a bed, mattress, sheet set, pillow, and that is the need we take care of. And holding that true and keeping the ship, if you will, steered in the right direction is a big challenge for nonprofits.
Mr. Luke, let's talk about the number one do. If you could only teach one strategic do, one practice that has outside positive effect on sustainability, what would it be and why does it trump all others?
It's a great question, and it's an easy answer. Daniel, when we grow in Sleep in Heavenly Peace, we grow about 50 chapters a year. And that means chapter presidents, people that hear about us, they want to come, they want to learn how we do what we do. So when they go back to their own communities, they can build beds for kids. Well, when we bring these chapter presidents in for training, I've always asked them what they think the hardest thing that they're going to face, like the biggest challenge they feel that they're going to face. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing for every nonprofit. And that's money. That's donations. How do we get more donations?
Hmm.
Now, for all of you nonprofits out there, this is the biggest lesson that you can take away in any lesson about nonprofits. And that is, you have to make your mission, whatever it is, whether it's cleaning up the ocean or helping dogs or counseling, or in our case, building beds for kids, whatever your mission is, it needs to be your fundraiser. Now, it might not be 100% of your fundraisers, but whatever it is, however you can make your mission, what you do, as part of a fundraising, then you will never starve. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Sleep in Heavenly Peace, when we first started out, we did fundraisers. I went business to business asking for sponsorships, trying to do that. And yeah, there was some success there. But what I learned was the easiest way for me to ask or get money from, whether it's a company, an individual, or whatever, was I'd like to have them be a part of the mission, right? So they can come in, they can build the beds, they can feel the fulfillment that comes from what this mission provides, a bed for a child. When you do that now, we don't, in Sleep and Have Peace, we don't need grants. We love them, but we don't need them. We don't need to go out and spend money or even valuable time doing galas or spaghetti feeds or auctions because we make money doing what we love doing, which is building beds for kids. So, any charity out there, whatever you do, find a way that your mission is actually your fundraiser.
Mr. Luke, as a founder, motivational speaker, as well as entrepreneur and author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my mission, even to be on this podcast, is to share and help raise awareness of child bedlessness, right? How bad it is. It's something that exists everywhere. It represents greater than 3% of the total population of any town on average. So raising awareness is my main goal. And then of course, once you know about it, providing a solution for people to solve it in their own communities. We I knew a long time ago child bedlessness in the United States was not going to be solved, well, anywhere in the country. It wasn't going to be, or the world rather. It's not going to be solved by some guy from Idaho. It's going to be solved by some local group of an individual that gets friends and family psyched up and pumped up to go and help the people in their own community. We just needed to provide a platform. We've done the platform, we've proven its success. And now, Daniel, my goal is to provide this platform, this successful platform, to every country, town, village on the planet that is willing to follow and do.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Luke, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Well, I don't know if you want to be like me, but but I will say, look, I'm a farm kid from Idaho, and I'm a simple guy. I work hard, and I want to help and serve others. Right? If I can do it, anybody can do it. We have it in us. Daniel. I do a lot of speeches, keynote speaking, and my main focus is on following these tiny moments that we have. Sometimes we might be sitting on the couch like I was, not knowing what to do, kind of depressed, feeling unfulfilled in life. And too often we get these little tiny moments, these sparks of inspiration to go do something, and we dismiss them way too easily, right? We don't have
Yes.
enough time, or I'm not good at that, or someone else is taking care of that, right? There's all sorts of excuses that we create almost instantly without even giving it time to settle in. And I'm here as a example to anybody that if a farm kid from Idaho can build a bed in his garage, and then a short time later, 10 years later, it has now become the largest bed building charity in the world. Anybody can do that. It just takes courage. It takes wanting to get off the couch, wanting to step up and take some time, and you can do it. Anybody can do it. That's my best advice.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. Luke. And can you please recommend a book of books that influenced your journey?
Oh, wow. Well, I mentioned to you before, I'm not a huge book reader. I grew up very religious, so I did read a lot of religious books. I do some self help books. I've really focused a lot on my own book. It's called More Than Just a Bed. It's coming out here in the fall. And it really is, I've really tried to improve myself. Read a lot of Zig Ziglar, and those self help or sales pitch type books that I've take bits and pieces out of each one of these books and apply them in a way that I think can help me grow, help me be ready to take on whatever next challenge I have. And so, although I might not have like the best book recommendation,
Hmm.
I will say that taking the time to educate yourself and learn some of these skills that you might not have but others do, reading them and finding them in books is a very fast and helpful way to improve your skills.
Yes, and thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Luke. And let's talk about the metrics that matter. Beyond number of people served, what are the one or two underrated but powerful metrics you advise every nonprofit to track the gauge of their health and impact?
Well, you said it right there. You need to be able to track your impact, right? If you don't have the ability, you need to find a way to do so. That will help you raise money. That will help you validate who you are. And when you get validated, when you get, let's call it credentials, if you will, of your nonprofit, that's when it's going to grow. And that's when people will get behind it. I mean, if you're like me, a farm kid from Idaho, I never really, I liked charity. I liked people that were doing good. What I didn't like was donating my money to a charity that I had no idea where it went. And I had no idea who they helped, whether it was someone next door or someone a country over, right? I wanted my money to help people locally, and I wanted the services that organization provides to help people locally, right? And so, that's why I wanted to structure SHP the way it has been structured, is because I think it's important that when you especially when you're starting a nonprofit, you need to focus locally, and you need to focus on how you can help people right next door, and then how those people right next door can help the next people right next door.
Yes, what an empowering answer, Mr. Luke. So for the funders listening, what is one do and one don't you wish every foundation and major donor would adopt to be a true partner in building sustainable and effective nonprofits?
Great question. And it does kind of go back to the same thing. I've found that most nonprofits have very little impact reporting. And when you approach a funder who's wanting to donate sacred dollars to you, the more you can report back to them what that sacred dollar has done, the more you'll lock them in and the more you'll find more, right? And so I had to learn this the hard way. We went 10 years, really almost, without really having effective impact reports. We could record and tell you exactly how many kids we helped, which really helped. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing we can provide is, hey, we've helped 350,000 plus kids. Those are big numbers.
Mhm, yes.
But now, because we're bigger and we have more reach and more bandwidth, we can now report exactly what having a bed for a child provides, what emotional stability and mood and good grades and all the impact that comes surrounding a child that has a bed, what that provides. And so nonprofits out there, if you want to lock in a funder, and you want that funder to stick around for a long time, grants, whether it's grants or individuals or organizations, you've got to provide an impact, a sustainable, well, sustainable might not be the right word, a impressive and accurate impact report for them. And then the second thing, like I mentioned earlier, is provide a service that they can be a part of your nonprofit. A funder will give you money, but if a funder shows up and puts his or her hands on the wood and gets dusty and works hard and feels the impact and feels the fulfillment of helping a child get a bed, yeah, that dollars will go up. There's many times we've had grantees and whatnot show up to builds, and we were asking for $5,000. They gave us 10.
So, Mr. Luke, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season as well. Comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in sixth season too. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101, our fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101, or in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Mr. Luke, at the end of the day, this work is about protecting and amplifying mission. What practice or ritual do you teach leaders to ensure that amid all of those do's and don'ts management, they never lose concentration to the core why
Yeah.
that brought them to this work?
Yeah. You you know, and this is really the responsibility of the founder. It's the responsibility of the executive director. You know, especially in those early days, you've got to set a precedent and stick with it. Be consistent with it. You know, when we started bringing on a lot of other people into our organization, they brought in all sorts of ideas of how to build the beds and things that we can provide. And it's not easy to go to someone and tell them no. You know, you can't do that, but have confidence to do that because it is the right thing to do, and you do not want to dilute your mission. You don't want to get away from what you do best. And so founders and executive directors and board members, this really relies heavily on board members. Their main responsibility is to stay the mission, to keep the executive director focused on what that mission is about. And so, you know, that lies heavily on their shoulders. And so you got to lay the foundation from the beginning and be stalwart. Don't move off of it. Stay focused on it and keep everybody else focused on it.
Mr. Luke Mickelson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your upcoming book, or whatever project that you're doing right now?
Uh, Thank you. Yes, you can visit shpbeds.org. You've got the site up of the local chapter you're part of. Really, the best thing I'd ask your audience to do is just share what you've learned today. Share this podcast. You know, let people know that you learned that there are children sleeping on the floor, and you can be a part of it. And if you're a book reader, stay close. You can find me on social media. You can find us at shpbeds.org. My book comes out here in probably 6 months, about where I talk about the history and the growth of going from a garage to globally a nonprofit, and some of the pitfalls and the do's and don'ts you can learn there in the book.
Mr. Luke, congratulations and thank you for helping our generation to generations to come. So I have one more question. How do you help a skeptical board or team focus solely on direct program spend, understanding the tangible ROI of investing in do's like professional development, technology, or a consultant?
It's great question. And you know, too often board members try to run an organization. I think people, especially the board and the executive team, they need to understand their roles and stay in their lanes. A nonprofit's not going to grow if you don't want to invest any time or money into it. You need to. And that goes back to structuring your nonprofit in a way just like you would a business. You can't have $100 come in and $100 go out. You know, you have to plan on profits. You have to plan on rainy days. You have to plan on scale and growth. All of those things cost a lot of money to do. And unless you just want to stay in a small town and not grow, you need a plan for that. And so everybody needs to be on board. You need to be a leader. You need to stand with a strong voice, not be afraid to ruffle a few feathers, but understand that people are there because they're passionate about what you're doing, and that needs to stay the focus. But by doing that, some of these things that are otherwise hard to do in for-profits, you can get by a lot easier.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Luke Mickelson. So, Mr. Luke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
Bodycom people, see you soon.